In this video, you're going to learn the 5 benefits of learning the Nashville Number system for worship leaders. By the end of it, you're going to know exactly why you should know it and what you can do with it. Coming up. Hey everyone, Spencer here from leadingworshipwell.com, your daily dose of practical worship leading tips. If you want to find those tips, head over to Instagram or Facebook at Leading Worship Well, where I'm posting new worship leading tips, just like the ones I'm about to share every single day. But you're here on YouTube, so go ahead, hit the subscribe button down below, and let's get into it, because today we're talking about the benefits and really what you can do with the Nashville Number system if you're a worship leader. In this video is the second video in a series that I started on the Nashville Number system last week. So if you have no idea what the Nashville Number system is or how to use it, that's perfectly fine. That's why I made the first video in this series explaining the Nashville Number system for worship leaders. You can check it out right there. And I could have gone either way. I could have explained the benefits first so that you were convinced that you should actually learn it, but I also felt like you should know what it is before I talk about in this video, like how to use it. So that being said, let's get into these benefits. Like, now that we know what the Nashville Number system is, if you don't, check out that video, but now that we know what the Nashville Number system is, what are the benefits of using it and learning it specifically for worship leaders? And there's really 5 main benefits. So let's go through them. The first is that it's easier to memorize your music. Do you guys memorize your music? Let me know in the comments below. If you don't memorize your music, chances are you think that it's too hard to memorize your music, and I completely understand that. Like I said, the Nashville Number system, I said this in last week's video, the Nashville Number system I feel is like the key to unlocking that next step in your musical progression, and these benefits are evidence of that, and one of those specific things is memorizing your music. And here's why it's so much easier to memorize your music when it comes to the Nashville Number system. It's because you probably think it's too hard to memorize your music right now, because you're thinking in terms of, okay, I've got to know that there's a G chord whenever we sing this part, and then there's a D, and then there's an E minor, and then there's a C, and then there's a G, and then there's a D, and then there's an E minor, and then there's a C, and then we're in the chorus, and it's a C, G, D, E minor, and so on. And you're thinking all in these chord names, which we learned last week through the Nashville Number system. You no longer think in chord names, you think in numbers. So it's easier to memorize numbers than it is to memorize chords, but I think it's also easier whenever you use the Nashville Number system to recognize that chords in songs pretty much just repeat a progression. Like, if you look at the chords to a verse in pretty much any modern worship song, there is a chord progression. It's doing the same thing over and over again. So instead of just memorizing G, C, D, E minor, G, C, D, E minor, G, C, D, E minor, the Nashville Number system helps you see, okay, well, G, C, D, E minor is actually a 1 to a 4 to a 5 to a 6 chord, and it's doing that the whole way throughout the verse of the song, verse 1 and verse 2. The chord progression for those parts is a 1, 4, 5, and 6. And so no longer do you need to memorize each individual chord that you're going to play, but now all you have to do is memorize, okay, the chord progression for the verse is 1, 4, 5, 6. And it becomes so much simpler. It simplifies the memorization process, because you aren't memorizing a million different chords. You're just memorizing the chord progression and the numbers of the chord progression. So that's the first benefit. It's easier to memorize your music. Now let's actually take that a step further, because I'm going to be honest with you. For me, and for a lot of people, we don't memorize our music, but we don't have the music up with us either. So how do we know what to play? Well, what the Nashville Number system does, this is number 2, is that you don't even need to memorize your music anymore, because you feel the chords that you're supposed to play. And this is really hard to explain, but if you're there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like if you can already do it, it's a feeling where we're not even thinking, okay, here's a G, D, E minor, C. We're thinking, this is what it feels like. I'm hitting the one chord. The one chord in the key of G, which is a G, or in any key, has a very specific feel to it. And it's almost like instead of memorizing what chords you're going to play, I mean, you still probably have to learn them once, but after that, you just feel them. And that's very hard to explain. I'm not saying like I have a superpower or the other people who can do that have a superpower. I literally think that that is a skill that you learn as you work through this Nashville number system. Let me know if I don't think I'm alone in that. If you can, oh man, my face is blown out right now. I'm super white. Come on. I don't know. If I'm not alone, let me know in the comments again, because I feel like a lot of people feel the chords. You're not memorizing them anymore. And this, like I said, is a skill that you can learn. You can actually learn to feel these chords, and the Nashville number system is what helps you do that. Which takes us to number 3. The Nashville number system, the benefit of it for worship leaders is that it develops your ear. You can hear or feel, like I talked about before, the chords. So that comes into play whenever you're learning your music. And like I said before, you're not memorizing it, but it also helps whenever you're figuring out new songs. Because once you can feel those chords, and you feel what a 1 chord and a 4 chord and a 5 chord and a 6 chord feel like, it becomes much easier to play by ear and just sit down, turn on a worship song. Worship songs are super simple, by the way. We complain about that all the time, that it's like the same 4 chords over and over again, and yet we don't want to memorize our music. That's besides the point. You can literally sit down and feel the chords of the song or play by ear because you know what a 1 chord feels like and a 5 chord feels like. So it improves your ear, and you can start playing by ear. So that's the third benefit. If you want to figure out the chords to a song on your own and release yourself from having to sit down and look at a chord chart, and you can just feel it instead, I'm telling you, it's so freeing. And that, like I said, is really the next step. If you're wondering, like, man, I felt stuck in my musical journey, no matter what instrument you play, like, this is it. This is how you take the next step. You learn the Nashville number system, you apply it over and over again until you start to feel it, and then that improves your ear. On to number 4. And this fourth benefit is super practical, because this is all about communication with your team. Knowing the Nashville number system, and it can't just be you, it has to be your entire worship team. So if your entire worship team doesn't know the Nashville number system, whoever doesn't know it, share that video with them from last week where I clearly laid out what the Nashville number system is. But once you all know the Nashville number system, it makes it so easy to communicate musically with your team. And there's a couple different situations where this is extremely helpful or particularly helpful. And let me just share an example. Let's say that you're playing a song in the key of B, but you, as a guitar player, let's say, doesn't want to just play B chord shapes. So you go capo 4 and you're playing G chord shapes. So now you're kind of thinking in the key of G, even though you know that you're in the key of B. But whenever you're communicating with a bass player, or maybe there's another guitar player who's playing without a capo on, how do you communicate with them? Because you're thinking in the key of G, even though you know you're in the key of B. They're thinking in the key of B because they're playing B notes, like the bass player doesn't have a capo, so they'd be playing B, E, F sharp, G sharp. So how do you bridge that gap? Well, it's the Nashville number system. Because the Nashville number system, as we learned last week, doesn't use chord names. It uses numbers to explain it. So it doesn't matter what chord or what key people are thinking in. All you have to do is speak the number. So instead of saying, okay, in my mind, I'm playing G shape, so I need to translate from G to the key of B. And so G, see how it's confusing it is? So if you could just simply say, okay, bass player, we're going to play the 1 chord here, and then the 6 chord, and then the 4, and then the 5. Simple as that. And if they understand what that means, then communication becomes so simple. And same thing with like a keyboard player. If they're transposed to a different key, let's say they transposed up, let's say you're in the key of D, they want to play in C shapes on the piano, and they transpose up to, you don't want to have to be thinking, okay, what chords do they need to play because they're transposed up? You can just say the chord numbers, and then they should automatically know. So it makes communication so much easier with your team. So if your team doesn't know the Nashville Number system, then share that video from last week. And finally, the last one, number 5, and this is the one that I use most often, and I think is probably the most beneficial personal benefit. Beneficial personal benefit. That's kind of saying the same thing over and over again, but you know what I mean. This is the benefit to you, is that the Nashville Number system, number 5, makes transposing so quick, so fast. You can literally switch between keys like that because you're feeling it now. And I could talk about that at length, but we're running out of time in this video. So what my plan is I want to show you how to transpose a worship song. Take it from one key, put it in another key, completely change the chords, but the chord progression is still the same, because you'll see with the Nashville Number system that a 1, 5, 6, 4 chord progression in the key of G still works as a 1, 5, 4, 6, or whatever I said before, chord progression in the key of D. So I'm going to show you that in next week's video. That is one of the most beneficial uses of the Nashville Number system, because like we talked about before, why would you want to change the key of a song? Well, not every song is singable in the original key, so sometimes we have to change that key. If you missed that video, check that video out here, how to put your songs in singable keys. I'm going to show you just a step further how you can actually figure out the chords of the new key. That'll be coming in next week's video. So there are the 5 benefits. Number 1, it helps you memorize your music easier. Number 2, you don't even really need to memorize your music after you've done it for a while. You just start to feel the chords. Number 3, it improves your ear. This is literally the key to unlocking the next step in your musical journey. Number 4, makes communication easier with your worship team. It simplifies things. You can just speak in numbers. You don't have to worry about the specifics of what everybody is playing. And then number 5, we'll cover this in the last video of this series in next week's video. It makes transposing songs to a new key so simple. So those are the 5 benefits. That's a lot of benefits, and that's why you should learn the Nashville Number system. So thanks so much for joining me today. Once again, my name's Spencer Cormany from Leading Worship Well. This is a whole series on the Nashville Number system, so if you want to check it out, this will be in a playlist. Make sure you catch from the very beginning. Once again, if you didn't hear what the Nashville Number system was, go check it out and learn it so you can be prepared for next week's video. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll catch you in the next one. Keep leading worship well.